Life has a way of throwing us into seasons that feel impossible to escape. We all face moments when we wonder if things will ever get better, when the weight of our struggles feels unbearable and no solution seems to be in sight. Maybe you're dealing with a financial crisis, a broken relationship, a health challenge, or deep disappointment. Maybe you've prayed, cried, and fought, yet nothing has changed. But here's the truth. No situation is too tough for God to turn around. There is no situation too hard for God. No matter how impossible things may seem, no matter how big the mountain in front of you looks, God is greater. He is not intimidated by your circumstances. He is not overwhelmed by your challenges. He is the God who created the heavens and the earth, the one who spoke light into existence, the one who parted the Red Sea, and the one who raised the dead to life. If he can do all of that, then he can certainly turn your situation around. We look at our problems and think they are too big to be fixed. We get discouraged because we can't see a way out. The doctor's report looks bad. The financial situation seems hopeless. The relationship appears broken beyond repair. The dream feels out of reach. But the size of our problem doesn't determine God's ability to handle it. What seems impossible to us is effortless for him. He is not limited by human logic, time, or resources. He can do in a moment what we couldn't accomplish in a lifetime. One of the biggest mistakes we make in tough situations is trying to solve everything in our own strength. We analyze, we stress, we worry, and we exhaust ourselves trying to figure it all out. But God never asked us to carry the weight alone. He never intended for us to rely on our own understanding. That means even when things don't make sense, even when we don't see a way, even when it looks like nothing is changing, we choose to trust that God is still working. God specializes in turning around what looks impossible. Throughout the Bible, we see examples of people who faced hopeless situations, yet God stepped in and changed everything. Think about the Israelites when they were trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army. From a human perspective, there was no way out, but God made a way where there was no way. He parted the sea and his people walked through on dry ground. The same God who did that is the same God who is with you right now. Maybe you feel like you are facing a Red Sea moment. You feel trapped, surrounded by problems with no escape in sight. But just because you don't see a solution doesn't mean God doesn't have one. Just because you don't feel like anything is happening doesn't mean he isn't working behind the scenes. His ways are higher than ours, and his power is beyond anything we can comprehend. He is not just able to turn things around. He is willing. God allows us to go through difficult seasons so that we can see his power in a greater way. If everything always went smoothly, if we never faced any challenges, we wouldn't need to rely on him. But when we are backed into a corner, when we have no choice but to trust him, that's when we truly see his faithfulness. It's in the toughest times that our faith grows the most. It's in the waiting that we develop patience. It's in the struggle that we learn to depend on him completely. God is never late. He is always on time. The breakthrough you've been praying for may not have happened yet, but that doesn't mean it's not coming. Delay is not denial. God's timing is perfect, and when he moves, it will be better than anything you could have imagined. What may seem like a setback is often a setup for something greater. The pain you are experiencing now may be the very thing God uses to prepare you for your destiny. The enemy wants you to believe that your situation is hopeless, that things will never change, that it's too late for a turnaround. But the enemy is a liar. God has the final say. He is the one who can open doors that no one can shut. He is the one who can restore what was lost, heal what was broken, and make a way where there is none. Your situation is not too hard for God. It may be too hard for you, but it's not too hard for him. Don't let fear and doubt convince you otherwise. Don't let discouragement make you give up before your breakthrough comes. Keep praying, keep believing, and keep standing on his promises, because when God moves, everything changes. What once seemed impossible will become a testimony of his power. What once seemed hopeless will become a story of his faithfulness. No matter what you are facing today, remember this: nothing is too hard for God. If he did it before, he will do it again. Trust him, lean on him, and believe that he is already at work turning your situation around. You may not see it yet, but in his perfect time you will, and when that moment comes, you will look back and realize that every struggle, every tear, and every prayer was leading you to the miracle that only he could bring. Difficult seasons are never easy. When life takes an unexpected turn, when the challenges seem never-ending, it's easy to feel like giving up. But what if the struggle isn't meant to destroy you? What if instead it's meant to develop you? What if the very thing you are trying to escape is actually the tool being used to shape you into the person you were created to be? Hard times are not pointless. They have a purpose. Waiting seasons are hard because they test your patience and your faith. It's difficult when you pray, but nothing seems to change. It's frustrating when you keep doing the right thing, but you don't see results. It's discouraging when it feels like other people are moving forward while you're stuck in the same place. But just because you don't see anything happening doesn't mean that God isn't working. Seeds grow underground long before they break through the surface. In the same way, God is working in your life, even when it's not visible yet. Every delay has a purpose. Sometimes we think we are ready for the breakthrough, but God knows otherwise. He sees what we cannot see. He knows what is coming. If he allows you to go through a season of waiting, it's because he is preparing you for what's ahead. He is strengthening you so that when the breakthrough comes, you will be able to handle it. He is teaching you patience, endurance, and faith. The waiting is not wasted. It's working for your good. Think about the strongest people you know. They didn't become strong by living an easy life. They became strong by facing hardships, pushing through difficulties, and refusing to give up. The same is true for you. Every challenge you overcome makes you stronger. Every test you pass deepens your faith. Every struggle you endure builds something inside of you that comfort never could. If you're in a tough season right now, remind yourself that you are growing. You are being shaped into something greater. Faith is trusting that even when you don't understand, God is still in control. It's believing that even when things don't go your way, he has a better plan. It's knowing that even when you don't feel strong enough, he is giving you the strength to keep going. The struggles you face today will one day be the very things that strengthen you for your future. The challenges that seem overwhelming now will become testimonies of how God carried you through. Difficult seasons don't last forever. The storm doesn't last forever. The pain doesn't last forever. But what you gain from it, the wisdom, the strength, the faith, those things will stay with you for a lifetime. One day you will look back on this season and realize that it was necessary. You will see how God used it to prepare you for greater things. You will understand why certain doors had to close and why certain prayers seemed unanswered at the time. What felt like a setback was actually a setup for something better. If you're in a tough season right now, don't lose heart. This is not the end of your story. What you are going through is not meaningless. God is working even when you can't see it. He is strengthening you, shaping you, and preparing you for something greater. Keep going, keep trusting, keep believing, because in time you will see that this season was not meant to break you. It was meant to build you. And when you come out on the other side, you will be stronger, wiser, and more prepared for the incredible things that God has in store for you. Waiting is one of the hardest things to do, especially when you're in a difficult situation. When life feels uncertain, when prayers seem unanswered, and when everything inside of you is desperate for change, patience doesn't come naturally. It's frustrating when you've done everything you know to do, when you've prayed, worked hard, stayed faithful, and nothing ever come. Or if your situation is just the way things will always be. But the truth is, waiting is not a sign that God has abandoned you. It's a sign that he is working behind the scenes in ways you can't yet see. Timing matters. You can have the right desire, the right dream, and the right goal, but if you move outside of God's timing, you won't be able to handle the blessing in the way He intended. Just like a seed planted in the ground needs time to grow before it can bear fruit, God often takes time to prepare us before He brings us into the next season. Rushing the process won't make the breakthrough come faster. It will only leave you unprepared for what's ahead. Trusting in God's timing means surrendering control. It means choosing faith even when things don't seem to be happening on your schedule. There's a difference between delay and denial. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. Sometimes what feels like a no is actually a not yet. God knows what we need, when we need it, and how to bring it into our lives at the perfect time. Many times we think we're ready for something, but God sees what we can't see. He knows what's ahead. He knows the weight of the responsibility that comes with the blessing. He knows what will happen if we step into something too soon. So in His love, He asks us to wait, not to punish us, but to prepare us. Seasons of waiting build character in ways that nothing else can. When things happen immediately, we don't always appreciate them the same way, but when we have to trust, when we have to rely on faith, when we have to keep believing, even when we don't see results, something happens inside of us. Patience grows, endurance develops, our trust in God deepens. The waiting season is never wasted. It is doing something inside of us that is just as important as the breakthrough itself. One of the hardest parts of waiting is watching other people step into their blessings while you're still waiting for yours. It's easy to look at someone else's life and wonder why their prayers were answered first, why their breakthrough came faster, or why their situation turned around before yours did. But comparison is a trap. Someone else's success doesn't mean your blessing isn't coming. Their timeline is not your timeline. God is writing your story in a way that is uniquely designed for you. The worst thing you can do in a waiting season is let bitterness take root because you're too focused on someone else's journey instead of trusting your own. Waiting is an act of faith. It's choosing to believe that God is working even when you don't see evidence yet. It's trusting that His timing is perfect even when you don't understand it. It's believing that He is preparing something for you even when it feels like nothing is happening. The waiting season is where faith is truly tested. Will you still trust Him even when the doors haven't opened yet? Will you still believe even when the answer hasn't come? Will you still follow Him even when things don't make sense? Faith that is only strong when life is easy isn't real faith. Real faith is believing when there's no visible proof. It's standing firm when everything around you tells you to give up. It's easy to get discouraged in the waiting, but that's exactly what the enemy wants. If he can make you impatient, if he can make you doubt, if he can convince you that God isn't working, then he can get you to give up right before your breakthrough comes. But the truth is, most people quit right before they see what they've been praying for. Don't let that be you. The answer is coming. The situation is shifting. The door is going to open. But you have to keep trusting. You have to keep believing. You have to hold on just a little longer. God's timing is not random. It's not accidental. It's intentional. If you don't have what you're asking for yet, there's a reason. If the situation hasn't changed yet, there's a purpose. Maybe it's because there's something you still need to learn. Maybe it's because He is protecting you from something you can't yet see. Maybe it's because He is preparing something even greater than what you originally asked for. Whatever the reason, you can trust that when the time is right, nothing will be able to stop what He has planned for you. The season you're in right now won't last forever. The waiting will end. The breakthrough will come. The promise will be fulfilled. But in the meantime, don't waste the waiting. Let it do what it was meant to do. Let it build your faith. Let it strengthen your trust. Let it deepen your relationship with God. Because when the time finally comes and you step into the blessing you've been waiting for, you'll realize that the process was just as important as the promise. And you'll see that every moment of waiting was worth it. Difficult situations have a way of consuming your thoughts, weighing on your heart and draining your energy. When you're facing hardships, it's easy to become overwhelmed by the problem. You replay the situation in your mind, analyzing every detail, wondering how things will change, and trying to figure out a solution on your own. The more you focus on the problem, the heavier it feels. Fear creeps in, doubt grows, and before long, the situation seems even bigger than it actually is. But what if the answer isn't in analyzing the problem, but in shifting your focus? What if, instead of dwelling on the situation, you turned your attention to the one who has the power to change it? Faith isn't about ignoring reality. It's not pretending that difficulties don't exist. It's about choosing to believe that God is greater than whatever you're facing. It's about recognizing that while the problem may be big, He is bigger. The key to breakthrough isn't found in stressing over the problem, but in shifting your focus to God. Worship has a way of changing your perspective. It takes your eyes off what's wrong and puts them on what's right, on His power, His faithfulness, and His ability to turn things around. When you focus on the problem, it grows in your mind. It starts to feel overwhelming, impossible, and permanent. But when you focus on God, everything changes. The problem doesn't necessarily disappear immediately, but your perspective does. You begin to see it through the lens of faith instead of fear. You remember that God has never failed you before, and you won't start now. You realize that His power is not limited by your circumstances. You understand that even in the waiting, even in the struggle, He is still in control. There's something powerful about worship in the midst of a storm. Anyone can praise God when life is good, when prayers are answered, and when everything is going well. But real faith is praising Him even when the breakthrough hasn't come yet. Worship isn't just about singing songs. It's about an attitude of trust. It's about saying, God, I don't see the way out yet, but I know You are still good. I don't understand why this is happening, but I trust that You are working. I don't feel strong right now, but I believe that You are my strength. Worship shifts the atmosphere. It takes the focus away from what's wrong and reminds you of what's right. It moves your heart from a place of anxiety to a place of peace. It turns your attention from the size of the problem to the greatness of God. When you choose to worship instead of worry, you are making a declaration of faith. You are saying that your trust is in Him, not in your circumstances. You are choosing to believe that His promises are still true, even when you don't see them fulfilled yet. One of the greatest examples of this is found in the story of Paul and Silas. They were thrown into prison for preaching the gospel. They were beaten, chained, and locked up in the darkest part of the prison. From a human perspective, their situation was hopeless. But instead of complaining, instead of giving in to fear, they began to worship. They sang praises to God in the middle of their pain, and something incredible happened. An earthquake shook the prison, their chains fell off, and the doors swung open. Their worship didn't just change their perspective, it changed their circumstances. We think that worship is only for church, only for Sundays, only for moments when we feel good. But worship is a weapon. It is one of the most powerful things you can do when you're facing a battle. When you praise God in the middle of the storm, it confuses the enemy. The devil expects you to be discouraged, to give up, to lose faith. But when you choose to worship instead, you are declaring that your trust is not in what you see, but in what God has promised. Worship isn't just about singing songs. It's about surrender. It's about letting go of control and trusting that God is in charge. It's about choosing to praise Him even when your emotions tell you otherwise. It's about believing that He is working even when nothing seems to be changing. Worship is a declaration of faith that says, I believe God is bigger than this problem, and I trust Him completely. If you're in a difficult situation right now, don't let worry consume you. Don't let fear take over your heart. Instead, shift your focus. Lift your eyes above the problem and fix them on the one who has the power to turn it around. Choose to worship even when it's hard. Choose to praise even when you don't feel like it. Because when you do, you invite God into your situation. You create space for him to move. And when he moves, everything changes. The battle is not yours to fight alone. Worship your way through it and watch him do what only he can do